Strangers will save your life before your friends and family do. You want to believe if life ever gets bad enough, your people will know. Someone close to you will hear it in your voice, see it in your face, clock the shift, ask the right questions, and help pull you out before you lose too much of yourself. Then abuse happens and you find out something brutal. The people you thought would catch you are not always the same people who could hold your truth. Some cannot see it, some do not want to, some need the image of your life more than they need the reality of it. Then one stranger says one honest thing and your whole body goes still because for the first time in a long time, somebody finally told the truth. Abuse does not only isolate you from other people, it isolates you from your own understanding. Isolation is not about who you stop seeing or calling, it gets built inside of your body. It shows up when you start telling the truth and it feels too expensive, when you hear yourself editing what happened before it even leaves your mouth, when your reality starts getting shaved down to something so much smaller and easier and less likely to start a fight. After long enough, silence stops feeling like silence and it is merely survival. That is what this episode is about, because abuse gets stronger in secrecy, distortion, shame, and confusion. And sometimes the people that are far enough away from your friends or family are the first ones willing to say what is actually happening. They are not trying to keep peace with you at dinner or trying to protect the marriage image. They're not asking you to make your pain easier to digest. They hear the truth and hand it back to you straight, and that can save your life. Some of you are waiting for people closest to you to become the people that can hold all of this. Meanwhile, your life is bleeding out behind closed doors, and the wait has cost enough. I'm Meaghan Webster. I'm an abuse recovery coach, a trauma-informed strategist, and the woman a narcissist hopes to never meet twice. This is the Narcissist's Worst Nightmare podcast, where survival ends, shadow becomes power, and you rise into the person impossible to manipulate, magnetize, or replace. Today, we are talking about isolation and abuse and how strangers will save your life before your family does. Now, I have 4 very significant stories of how strangers helped me with my sobriety and leaving abuse while friends and family could not or would not see it or help or understand it. When I was first trying to get and stay sober, friends and family were not interested in listening, helping, or understanding, but I found a community inside of AA. I was met with an unwavering amount of love and support, no matter if I relapsed, and I never had that before without judgment. When I decided I wanted out of my first abusive relationship, I had a plan in place with a friend who no-showed, and I had a tiny window of time to leave. I messaged a local Facebook group, and what came out of that was 2 women coming forward and opening their homes to me. If you've been listening to my podcast for a while, that relationship I tried to leave 11 times, and that was not the last one. When I showed up with bruises and marks to an AA meeting, 2 women took me aside to a park and had a coffee with me and told me how they left abuse. They didn't ask me anything. They just shared, and the day that I asked for help, they were the reason why I was able to leave my first abusive relationship. When it came to my marriage and I first told people I was being abused, I was questioned, shamed, and told that I knew what I was getting into. But one woman, about a year later, told me I was being abused, and she was the first safe person that I could talk to about that. I'm going to be getting into all of these stories deeper later, but I do always want you to understand why I share here, and I'm going to get into these stories a bit deeper later, but I want you to know where I share from and why it matters for you. This is why I build communities like the RRR membership for women and Beyond the Brave for men. It is usually people's first time being seen and heard and held without judgment. Abuse does not only isolate you from people, it isolates you from your own understanding. Most people think it's physical distance, that you stop seeing friends or going places or posting or calling. And sometimes it does look like that. A lot of the time it starts much earlier and much quieter. It starts with the little comments after you spend time with somebody else. It starts with the weird moods when you get home. It starts with the conversation that gets turned on you after you open up to the wrong person. You slowly learn that telling the truth costs energy. Your body adapts. It edits faster, and pretty soon the isolation is not only around you, it's also inside of you. This is where abuse gets a lot of power. It teaches you to pre-manage your own reality before you ever share. You stop saying exactly what happened. You no longer name what it feels like to you. You stop saying you're scared and you start saying things like, it's just been hard lately. You no longer tell the whole story because it sounds too ugly, too complicated, too embarrassing, or too exposing for somebody else to hear. Then the person hurting you does not actually need you to go silent every time. Your body is doing half the work for them. This is where people get trapped for years. And it's not about a lack of intelligence, because abuse makes truth feel very expensive. It makes one honest sentence feel heavier than carrying a month of confusion by yourself. You start thinking the problem is only if you are alone, but the deeper problem is that your understanding is getting diminished in real time. Your body is living in anticipation. You understand other people's moods before you read yourself. You track tone of others before you understand your own needs. You stay very busy to keep the atmosphere from turning, and all of that attention going outwards mean you have less and less contact with what you know inside. Then something even worse happens. The lies start sounding being kinder than the truth. We call it a rough patch. We're under stress. There was a communication breakdown. There was a wound. We're both trying. No relationship is perfect. Maybe I'm just being too sensitive. Meanwhile, your body is exhausted, your world is shrinking, and the truth is sitting in your throat like broken glass. That is how abuse gets into your head without needing one giant explosion every day. It trains you to keep making the truth smaller until you start treating it like it doesn't mean anything at all. Most people still want family to be the place that gets it without anything else. You want them to hear your voice and know something is off. You want them to watch one interaction and know something is wrong. You want them to care more about your safety than the image of the relationship. That is the fantasy, and abuse shatters this for a lot of people. The ones you thought would catch you are not always the ones who can tolerate your truth once it shows up in full. Oftentimes, family is in denial. They're scared. They might know exactly enough to feel uncomfortable, but not enough to help. They do what most people do when their reality is threatened by a story that they want to keep. They might minimize it, normalize it, or push it back onto you. Marriage is hard. Every relationship has issues. Maybe you're both under pressure. Maybe you should not make a big decision right now. Have you tried going to therapy? Maybe they didn't mean it like that. Have you thought about the kids? Those lines do real damage because they teach your body that even when finally telling the truth to someone that you qualify as safe, still might not get it. Those kinds of responses from people that you love and respect doesn't just hurt in the moment. It sends people backwards. It can cost them months, sometimes years. And it's not because they wanted to lie, but now the truth feels dangerous from both sides. The relationship is one danger, and being misunderstood by the people you thought would help becomes another. And this is how strangers will save your life. It might be a group, a meeting, a comment section, a DM, an email that this is abuse, and your whole body knows the difference. It's not image management. There's no pressure to keep things neat. It's just absolute truth, and that's why strangers can save lives. They are not wiser than your family, but they are freer to tell the truth when everyone else is still busy protecting something. I'm not saying family never gets it. I am saying closeness does not guarantee capacity or courage, and blood does not guarantee someone can hold the full weight of what is happening to you. And if they cannot, this is not proof, okay, that you've imagined it. It is an understanding that they do not have the capacity for this part. Strangers will be able to tell you the truth faster because they do not care about keeping your old life intact. Family usually has a story they need to protect. Friends sometimes too. They know a version of your partner they met at dinners and holidays and birthdays or around the kids. This version, the public facade, the version that can hold eye contact and stay reasonable for hours on end. They are also attached to the version of you they need to believe is okay. It makes people slow. It makes people softer to the understanding that they should be. It makes them reach for safer words than real truth, and that can force a bigger reckoning than what they're ready for. A stranger has none of that. They're not trying to preserve an image. They do not care about keeping Christmas okay. They're not trying to save your marriage. They hear what you said, and they answer things you actually want. You spend months, sometimes years, making your own experience so small that people can just tolerate it. Then one person with no investment in the lie says, no, that's abuse, and your whole body knows. Not because you told it differently, not because you forced it down. They just did not ask you to defend your pain. They did not hand you back a different version of your truth that was keeping other people in your life comfortable. Sometimes the truth can sting. Most of the time, somebody else telling the truth to you can feel like oxygen when you've been living inside of abuse. This is how strangers become lifelines. They do not save you because they are special. They are outside of the containment. They are outside of the abuse. They are outside of the family system, the social performance, and the abuser's public masks, so they don't have to respond to anything but the reality instead of responding to the story. When somebody's emotionally invested in lies, they cannot hand you back your full truth. They cannot hold that space for you. If somebody in your life needs to stay, this is why I'm so adamant about community. You hear one story from somebody else and you think, holy fuck, that is me. You hear someone else sharing and realizing the thing that you were ashamed to say is actually not weird at all. It's completely normal inside of abuse. The validation, the understanding, the compassion that happens inside of a room where nobody's going to flinch at what you say. Nobody's going to minimize it. Nobody's going to rush to protect him or your relationship or fix you. Nobody's going to tell you that your marriage is hard. Suddenly, your body has a new reference point. Your nervous system acknowledges that it has somewhere to stand. It's safe. It gives you proof. And there's going to be a crack in the isolation that is big enough for your reality to start showing through. This is where, so I don't talk about my relationship to my narcissist ex-boyfriend that I was with prior to my ex-husband because I am very detached from it and it feels like a very long time ago, like 2018, 2019. This relationship was emotionally, physically, sexually, and financially abusive. I was afraid for my life with this person and I did try to leave 11 times. And this is why I teach on things like the emotional emotional exit before the physical exit, and having community around you making the difference. So I'm going to tell 2 stories on how strangers saved my life from that relationship. One of the times I tried to leave, my friend and I had made a plan. We set a date and a time, and I was to pack all of my things and essentially be ready, and we had about an hour window to get all of my stuff out into my vehicle and her vehicle and be gone. I remember sitting there waiting, and she hadn't answered any of my texts that morning. Then she wasn't answering calls, and I had this pit in my stomach that I was actually not going to be able to undo everything I just did. I was not going to be able to unpack everything in the hour if I was not able to get out. I decided to message a local Facebook group about my situation. I shared that I was being abused, that I had a plan to get out, and the plan fell through. I explained what I needed, a place to stay or a place to at least hold my things. I had a full-time job and I was happy to pay, but I was packed and ready to go in that moment, and I didn't have a place to go. I was inundated with love and support, and most people shared they couldn't take me in, and they gave reasons, but they wanted to continue to check in with me. But 2 women opened their homes to me, and one of them was to my location within 20 minutes of me posting that message. Looking back on it, I don't know where I got the courage to do that, because that local Facebook group was where I grew up, meaning like my friends were in there, my parents' friends, people that I worked with, they were all in that group. And I think I was at a point where I was so scared that if I stayed, I might not actually make it out. Now, that was not the end of the relationship. I think it was the longest stretch of time that I'd had away, but I was very deep in a trauma bond. I truly didn't understand abuse other than what I was Googling back then. During that time, I was trying to get and stay sober. I had relapsed at some point during that time out of the relationship because the trauma bond was too strong. I didn't know how to unpack it, and I didn't really have anyone to talk to. Nobody understood why I wanted to keep going back to someone that did so much harm to me. And it felt easier to keep it to myself because I carried a lot of shame with that. And my way of coping back then was to drink and numb out so I didn't feel the effects of what was happening. I went to a morning AA meeting outside in a park, and it was summer. It was very hot. I was in shorts and a t-shirt, and despite my very strong efforts to cover the bruises on my body and my face with concealer, I'm not a makeup artist. And I had 2 women after the meeting invite me for a coffee, and we were chatting about normal things for a while of sobriety and, weather and whatnot. And then they started asking me about my relationships. I was someone that was considered a chronic relapser inside of AA at that point, and people were trying to help me, but I wasn't really open and letting people into my whole life. I could talk about the drinking, I could talk about my parents, but I was not willing to talk about my relationship. And when they asked me about it, it felt a little bit different. And when they asked who was in my life today, I explained it was my boyfriend. And when I said it out loud, it was because I was isolated. It's because I was not allowed to see or speak to anyone. I had a job, but no real relationships with them because I just was not allowed. And they both went on to tell me stories of their abusive marriages and the impact it had on them and their mental state, their finances, their children, their choices, their alcoholism. And I remember sitting there thinking, why are you telling me this? Like, at the time, it was a little bit confusing, but I also felt an insane amount of relief because they understood what I was going through, and I didn't actually have to say anything. At that point, I still feel like I was protecting the relationship and myself from judgment and making choices that I felt like I wasn't going to commit to, like leaving and staying gone, which I felt would disappoint them and their efforts in trying to help me. In my experience, being isolated when you're abused is one of the loneliest places you could ever be. People that have never been abused don't understand what it feels like, and you can't actually just text that friend or call your mom. Everything has to be incredibly calculated and at a precise time, or you need to cover your tracks because you will get blamed and questioned and manipulated, and at some point it is just easier to not do it, right? Because you're so tired and your brain is just fried and you don't know what the truth is anymore. So to have the energy and effort to even explain it to someone else feels like a job in itself. Those 2 women that I mentioned were the ones that I reached out to when I was finally ready to leave. And I've told this story on the podcast before, but it was my 6 months of consecutive sobriety, the first time I had ever achieved that in like 15 years. And I was chairing a meeting, and the result of me staying and closing that meeting versus leaving the moment he started blowing up my phone 20 minutes after 6 resulted in my eyes being closed out with a punch. And I knew that I had to be done. They stood beside me while I packed my things the next day, while I broke the trauma bond, while I found an apartment for myself, while I broke my sobriety again because I was in so much pain from that relationship. They taught me eventually that I didn't have to live off how I felt, my emotions. They taught me how to regulate, how to let things go, how to put things down that weren't mine, how to own my own part and not let what happened define me. I'm no longer in AA. It's been years, and I say that AA saved my life for a lot of reasons, but it was the community, the people inside that were further along than me, that had been where I'd been, that were so willing to share what had happened and how they worked through it, live these beautiful, free, happy lives. That's actually the part that saved me. Community is just does not help. It breaks isolation at the root, and that's different. A lot of people still think support is extra. It's nice to have, helpful if you can get it, something you can add on once you are already halfway out. That is not how this works. The right room can be the beginning of the whole thing, because the abuser gets weaker the second that your reality stops living alone in your head. When somebody else can hold it with you, hear you, reflect it back to you, the structure of the relationship starts cracking, and it's not all at once. It will start small. You will stop thinking this is impossible for other people to understand, or acting like your situation is something nobody else will ever get. And you'll stop believing so deeply in the shame story that says if people knew the full truth, they would back away. I see this inside of the RRR membership all the time. Last weekend in Canada, we had a long weekend, and I think it was Sunday. There was 40 plus messages in there, 2 different women going through 2 different experiences, and there was nothing but love, respect, and support, right? So people think that they need help with one relationship, one breakup, one leaving plan, one co-parenting issue. But what happens in community, it's what isolation never could give them. It's helping them get their sanity back in pieces. It's somebody else saying the exact same thing that they're actually scared to say out loud. Somebody else talking about their nervous system or a hard day, or that they hid something and they're finally coming clean with it. Someone else says they also thought they were too smart for this, and now they feel stupid that they got trapped for so long. Suddenly the shame doesn't have to be this thing that's a cage. It gets to be open in a room full of truth. It changes people. In real time, I witness this all the time on calls and in our Telegram channels. Their nervous system stops treating this whole relationship like it's an unspeakable private failure. Their body stops carrying the level of secrecy that they've had to, because they're not in survival anymore. They're seeing patterns. They're understanding how support looks. And it's not pretty, guys. Healing is not this cute adventure like Instagram wants to sell you. This shit's hard. But being in a room that can handle your reality without flinching, without questioning, with nothing but support, it's going to change how you show up in this world, because you now have a safe home to go to. And I think a lot of people think the internet is like the wild, wild west. The majority of my life is lived virtually. My boyfriend is here in person, my son obviously, but everyone else that's in my life is all over the world. I have clients all over North America and the UK. My dad is in Ontario and Mexico. My best friend is in Ontario. I have another really good friend that's in Tennessee. Community is going to look different for everybody. And I'm sure that there might be some in-person mom groups here, but it's not going to hold space for something like trauma and abuse. And safety happens when there is space held in a specific room, right? So having access to that on your phone, on a call, is very important for a lot of people that have a desire to leave abuse and get some help. Right after my son was born, I knew that I needed to get out of my marriage. And at the time, nobody knew anything about what was happening behind closed doors. They saw me on social media move provinces, get married, have a baby, and buy a house. Everyone was proud of me, the life that I had changed with my sobriety and who I had become. There were very few people that I trusted with anything in this world that I would consider this deep. I called my mom's best friend and I told her, and her first question was, "Are you still sober?" When I called my sister, she also questioned if I was sober, and then told me that marriage is for life, and I knew what I was getting myself into. When I spoke to my sponsor, she reminded me that I'd been in an abusive relationship before, and her question was, "Did you not say this about your last relationship?" And when I told my dad, what he shared with me is that I needed to go have a conversation with God and seek his guidance. Hearing things like that, I've made an entire podcast episode on this, what people say or do that shame people into staying in abuse. It's not on purpose. It's not because they don't love you. It's usually unconscious and they don't understand, and it's only from a place that they've never been through it, or they're from a different generation. They carry a different mentality. They have a different understanding, or there is a lack of understanding, or they are just unwilling to see the truth. But it keeps people stuck in the cycle of abuse because you've questioned yourself, right? And what's happening now is the people that you trust, the people that you know love you, now question you too. So you were sitting in the exact same place. About a year later, because I shut up after that, I never mentioned it again. About a year later, I hired a woman to work in my business. We spent a lot of time on Zoom. She's in Ontario, I'm in New Brunswick. And oftentimes, my now ex-husband would come into my office, swing open the door and just start yelling, talking. He had zero respect for me. me what I did, even though I was the primary source of income. He didn't care if I was on with clients or my team or by myself. Whatever he wanted or needed was always urgent, always demanded in some kind of very aggressive tone, mannerisms. I was on a call with her and we were mapping out a launch right before a client call, and he came swinging in. He was angry about what? I honestly couldn't remember, but he didn't know that I was on a call. He thought I was just at the computer, and he was like level 10 screaming. And I tried to meet the call, but I didn't get there fast enough, and she had heard the majority of it. After our coaching call, she FaceTimed me and asked me to go for a walk or a drive or be in a place where I could be by myself. And she said, "You do know that you're being abused, right?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "You know you don't deserve that, right?" And it was the first time since entering that relationship that someone had not just heard me or heard what was happening, but confirmed it. Now, if you've experienced more than one abusive relationship, you are going to understand what I'm about to say. There's a part of me that questioned how abusive my marriage was, or how much of it was in my head, because it was not black eyes and bruises. Maybe it wasn't as bad as my ex-boyfriend, so, we can tolerate. And no, it doesn't make it right, but I minimized it because it wasn't as bad, and because no one seemed to agree with the fact that I was calling it abuse, the people that I had let know right after my son was born, right? So for me, it was very confusing. That woman became my best friend, and it's not just because she confirmed I was in an abusive marriage. She was also the person to tell me that I had to create a safety plan with her, with a blueprint of my house, the local RCMP office number, contact to my dad, and a code word. If I ever needed something, I could text her if I couldn't call. She told me when things were escalating and that I had to call the RCMP, or that she was the person that January of 2025 and this time last year became absolute hell with my ex, and she let me scream, cry, and then she reminded me who the fuck I am. She let me go get it all out, and then she asked me what we were going to do about it. There were a lot of moments where I couldn't make the plan or see beyond what was happening with co-parenting in court and lawyers, and the only reason why she knew what I needed was because she had left an abusive marriage, and she was willing to sit with me in it with love and respect for my journey and my healing with no judgment. 2 years ago, that woman was a complete stranger on Instagram, and now we are both women that help other women heal from different aspects of trauma together and separately. We both live free lives without abuse with our kids, rebuilding finances, identity, and truth. The right room does not just help you leave, it helps you come back home to yourself, because a lot of you are not just isolated from other people. You've been isolated from your own voice, judgment, sense of what is normal, your body, your future. When you are in the right room, that starts getting handed back to you piece by piece. And it's not by rescuing you, it's by holding up a mirror and reflecting back to you, by believing in you, by not needing you to audition your pain before you're allowed to call it real. That is why I will never act like community is something that could be outside of recovery. It needs to be part of it. It is the one thing that will keep people alive long enough to make the next move. One safe room can do more for somebody's nervous system than 100 private spirals ever could. One conversation might crack open a year of silence. One group that holds space does what family could not. And that is not a small thing. It's the bridge between hiding and healing. I want to get really truthful with you about something. A lot of people believe staying isolated is protecting themselves and protecting the relationship or protecting what might happen. It's not protecting you in the way that you think it is. It might protect you from one uncomfortable conversation or another person's bad response or the shock of hearing your own reality out loud before you're ready. But it also feeds the abusive relationship. It keeps your confusion to yourself. It keeps the shame hot and warm. It keeps the wound in charge of your story. And that is a massive price to pay just to avoid being misunderstood, which is why the right room matters. Not everyone gets access to your truth or deserves the full story, and not everyone is equipped to hold it. Staying hidden from the wrong people makes sense. Staying hidden from the right people will cost you more than you think. And there is a difference. A lot of you have not been allowed to make that difference out loud clearly. You went from telling nobody to hoping anybody would finally understand, and neither one of those moves are what you need. You want to have a space where you know what this is, and you know that these people can hold it without turning it into a project or a problem to solve. Isolation is not just a lack of people in general. It's a lack of having the right support around you from the right people. You do not need everybody to get it. You need the right people to get it. And that changes the conversations that you have with yourself. You stop making everything a universal understanding as the goal, and you get your energy back. You no longer waste your life trying to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop hiding your truth in front of rooms that only know how to question it. You no longer wait for the exact people who failed you to suddenly become the people who will free you. The waiting in that keeps people sick, keeps them in harm, keeps them lonely, hoping for rescue from the same system that trained them to go quiet in the first place. The right space works differently. It hears things fast. It doesn't need you to give 10 disclaimers. It doesn't make you prove your pain. It doesn't ask you to help them understand while your life is on fire. And they do not need you to protect your abuser's image while your own body reality is falling apart. So if you've been listening to this today and you are telling yourself, I don't have anybody, that is why this episode was important to me. You don't need 50 people. You don't need your family. You need one place where your story is not too much, too complicated, too unbelievable, or too late. You need one place where the truth does not have to come in tiny, safe pieces. You need a safe place where you can explore what happened to you so you can unpack it and name the pattern so your body no longer runs with it. I don't want you to keep hoping and waiting for something from somebody else that they cannot give you. I don't want you to wait another month, another year, questioning whether you are in abuse or how you can leave. You do not need more closeness to people who cannot hold the reality of what happens when it shows up. You need the right kind of support that does not go and hand your pain back to you in smaller words or ask you to keep bleeding quietly so other people can stay comfortable. That is what the RRR membership is about. You will break your silence, you will have your clarity come back online, and the real work of getting your identity large and in charge again is going to happen for you. And if this is hitting you because you are a man carrying the same kind of private pain and trying to keep your whole world standing while something underneath of it is falling apart, Beneath the Brave is here for you too. It is an exclusive men's membership that we opened up this month. If this episode cracks something open and you good, please share it with another person that needs it. Send me a DM on Instagram and tell me what landed the hardest for you. This is the Narcissist's Worst Nightmare podcast, where survival ends, shadow becomes power, and you rise into the person impossible to manipulate, magnetize, or replace.